What's going on, everyone? We've been an absolute kick lately talking about set 6 cards, and well, it's a great time to do it because it's a brand new set. I gotta talk about some of the sleeper cards of Secrets of Power. We have talked about the top 10 best cards for sure, and there are some pretty solid ones out there, but none of those cards on that list is going to be on the list today. These are cards that didn't quite make the top 10, but are still cards that actually have a pretty significantly solid chance because of whatever niche deck that they fit in, or maybe a style that they fit in, just doing some absolute work. A big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon for, well, some of you actually playing these cards up against me. And let's dive into our first one today. Kind of an unassuming one at first glance. We've got GNK Power Droid, 2-cost ground unit in command, 1/3. On attack, the next unit you play this phase costs 1 less. This one is, like I said, very unassuming. A 2-resource 1/3 can die to your random battlefield marines, Sabine Wrens, and things like that. Yes. But it's also a threat that must be killed, which is very interesting. Similar to Jedi Counselor in that, right? It has less of a big payoff where Jedi Counselor could potentially give you that 2-resource discount. And you oftentimes needed some other setup for the Jedi Counselor. The GNK Power Droid doesn't really need any other setup. You just play this unit individually, and then you attack, and you get to go ahead and get something for 1 cheaper. This one I've really seen in more hardcore big payoff decks. You really need a big payoff for this thing to really function. Like when you get to that mid or late game, you just win the game, unless your opponent has put on a ton of pressure on you. That's the type of deck that GNK Power Droid really works in. So we're talking decks that are, maybe Palpatine style or Piet style, where you get to play like big capital ship after big capital ship, or big unit after big unit, and dominate the game that way because of the extra discount you're getting from the Power Droid. I mean, if you think about this kind of in an ideal scenario, if this does stick around for a couple of turns, maybe till like turn 3, right? Your opponent's maybe playing a space-oriented deck. You're playing this in Piet Red. You can attack, you can deploy Piet, and then you can play a Devastator on 5 resources. That's incredible. That is an incredible payoff for the GNK Power Droid. Super, super interesting style. And it's also a droid, which works with the previous kind of invisible hand Piet Red version. A card that is really interesting when we first saw it, we've got the Wrong Ride. Very simple. 3-resource event in Cunning. You exhaust 2 enemy resources, but it also has plot. This one has been very, very obnoxious to not only play with, but also play against. There are some decks that, if they get this off at the right time, completely ruin your entire game plan. Think, for example, a Kira flip turn, where you are expecting to flip Kira and then Overwhelming Barrage or deploy some sort of plot mechanic. And your opponent has their 5 to deploy leader, plays their leader, plays the Wrong Ride, and you're stuck with 3 resources. It completely messes with the kind of dynamic of some matchups, because there are certain turns that are really key turns to flip the game back in your favor. And just by delaying that turn by 1 set of actions from attacks from units, or maybe just deploy a leader, that can completely flip the advantage in your favor. This is one of the harder cards to get use out of. You really need to know your opponent's matchup very well, or your matchup against your opponent very well. You need to know kind of what cards you are going to lose to or potentially cause problems for you. And you're going to need to know when an actual good time this is for, right? Maybe you play it on, I don't know, turn 3, when you've got your 4 resources, your opponent's got 4 resources. Maybe that's the time to use it. Maybe it's turn 5 when your opponent's got 6 resources. Maybe it's when your opponent's got almost have 8 resources to super laser blast you, and this is the only way you can actually finish out the game. Depends on the matchup, right? Depends on the leader you're playing, depends on the leader your opponent's playing, and the deck overall. This is a really, really kind of mind-gamey card that can really do some absolutely disgusting things. We finally got a Captain Rex that I am proud of. This one, 6-cost ground unit in Vigilance Heroism, a 7/7 that says when played and when he completes an attack, you give this unit and an enemy unit Sentinel for this phase. This guy really is just an absolute tank that actually puts up a major threat for your opponent. If you think about the other 6-cost Sentinels in these aspects, but just in general, 6-cost Sentinels that you're seeing oftentimes, they're 4/6s, 5/6s. If you're lucky, maybe like a 4/7, right? This guy is a 7/7 7. When you're on the 6th resource turn and your opponent's kind of setting up and trying to close out the game and you're just trying to survive, this guy is the difference maker because he actually finishes off units. When you got Obi-Wan, yes, maybe Obi-Wan comes down and you deploy another unit and you get to get the 2 experience tokens, and maybe that provides enough value overall, right? Obi-Wan kind of acts as a 6/8 because you get 2 experience worth of tokens, but it's not on Obi-Wan himself. So oftentimes happens is maybe your opponent's got a 5 toughness unit, or maybe he's got like a 6/6 or a 6/5 on the opposing side of the battlefield, like a Poe Dameron's out in the battlefield. They can kill your Obi-Wan, keep their unit alive, which means you still have to do something to deal with that unit, okay? Captain Rex not only is extra tanky, but also has the effect of finishing basically whatever your opponent chooses to attack into it. And that is what makes it a little bit more different than any of the other Sentinels that we had, and I think it can be big for some decks. Now, if you watch my 10 best cards from Secrets of Power, you would note that one of the cards in there was the Imperial Dark Trooper, a 2 resource 3/3, and for a similar vein, Warrior of Clan Ordo is here as well. 2 cost ground unit in aggression. It's a 3/3. Now, on attack, you may disclose aggression. If you don't, you have to deal 2 damage to your base. So the downside of this is you get a 2 resource 3/3. But if you don't have that aggression card, you're suddenly dealing 2 damage to your own base. In reality, there are some decks this is a benefit for, right? Like Padme, for example, this is an amazing addition because you are guaranteed on the following turn. Well, not guaranteed, I suppose, but if you've constructed your deck correctly and you're playing around it, you are basically guaranteed to get that Padme trigger off. It also is just a 2 resource 3/3 in a lot of cases. If you're playing any deck that's going to be a deck that is getting in damage and wants a couple of early units like this 2 resource 3/3, you're going to have some aggression units or events to go ahead and disclose, and you just get a 2 resource 3/3. It cannot be said enough that the more sets that we get, the more early plays that we can slot in decks that actually want those early plays. You'll go in and you'll start building a deck and you're like, dang, I need 9 to 12 good turn 1 plays. This is a card that you're happy to slot in your deck because it's very aggressive and can also oftentimes trade favorably into units that your opponents are playing. That's the key. That's what makes these 3/3s so powerful. 2/4s are great and all, yes, but if you're looking to be just that little bit more aggressive, a 3/3 stacks up pretty nicely against a 2/4 because the 2/4 can't immediately kill it, which is really good because you're trying to get in damage. And also, it dwarfs any of the 2/3s out there, which is huge, absolutely massive. And next up, we've got a Jar Jar that is actually playable. 2 cost ground unit in command, a 2/1 with, when played, you may give another friendly unit +2/+2 for this phase, and with plot. So very, again, unassuming card, similar to the GNK Power Droid. 2 resource, 2/1. Okay, when played, you get a little pump effect. Is this really that good? Realistically, yes. Basically, the decks that are looking to kind of do some sort of explosive, either go wide strategy or end the game quickly, Jar Jar fits absolutely perfect in. He action cheats because you're deploying him with your leader. You can even put the +2/+2 on your leader, potentially to keep it alive for a single attack, or giving it to another unit to get in that 1 attack. And that's kind of the key. The +2/+2, it gives you that extra toughness, but also gives you that power in order for you to just get in that little bit of damage that you might need to close out the game. But not only that, you also get a 2 resource 2/1, right? Like, yes, you get the +2/+2, and that can help a unit. Maybe your opponent still chooses to attack that unit, trades with it, whatever it is, or hits it, their unit dies, but your unit's going to die next phase. Well, Jar Jar sticks around. And maybe that little bit extra chip damage is going to be the conducive to your success as to whatever more aggressive deck that you're playing. I will say there are a few decks that Jar Jar looks a lot better in. Decks like Mon Mothma or Sabine, where you're getting in early, you got units to deploy, and you want to get in that extra damage. And might I say, with Sabine specifically, it works amazingly with Yoda's lightsaber as a 4 resource turn, where you can get potentially 5 power over to your Sabine, 3 of it, which stays on her forever, and also getting a 2/1 alongside all of that. Honestly, a card that probably could have made it to the top 10 cards of Secrets of Power. Maybe that's a hot take, but we've got Sudden Ferocity, a 3 cost upgrade in aggression with plot +3/+0 as the upgrade. Pretty straightforward. We've talked about it a lot with Secrets of Power, but upgrades, they went really safe with them. And I mentioned this a couple times. It's probably a good way to go in most cases. Just because it can be really risky to, have something that can immediately be deployed to your leader. And this is an upgrade that really shows that power. You know, if this was a standard upgrade with let's say normal stats for 3 resources, this would be +3/+3. If that was +3/+3, this would be so broken in terms of how much value you get from this. There are so many different scenarios where, you know, you're playing an aggressive lead, you're playing that Han style deck where you get to reset your resources and you can play multiple plot cards and cards from your hand, getting value out of that basically extra draw card type mentality. It can go on space units, which is really, really key. It's really, really solid in other decks. Even I've tried it in like Sabine, it can do some work there. Just having a leader that can deploy relatively early, take advantage of this, get basically a draw card type of effect, and put some extra power on the board and use that amount of resources that you may otherwise could not have. This definitely fits pretty nicely. I'm curious to see if this is going to be one of those cards that really shift the meta. I'm not convinced that it's quite that good or anything like that, but it has been very powerful in a select few decks. And the question is it powerful enough to bring those decks up to the top of the meta? And now we're going to talk about 2 cards that I've definitely warmed up to the more I have played. The first one being Faith in Your Friends, a 2-cost event in Cunning Heroism. Search the top 3 cards of your deck for a card and draw it. Then you may disclose Cunning Heroism. And if you do, create 2 spy tokens. Now I'll say this, if you cannot create the 2 spy tokens, this card is pretty weak. You really want to be able to create those spy tokens alongside getting the draw card type effect. The stage where this is really, really good is when you're in a situation when your opponent's playing a more controlling value deck and you can keep your hand full while also putting a ton of pressure on your opponent. 2 bodies, each having essentially 2 power and 2 toughness in a situation where your opponent's not deploying a ton of units is game changing, right? Imagine up against like an Iden deck or whatever, and your opponent's standard play on turn 2 is going to be like a Power of the Dark Side, maybe a resupply. But if it's a resupply, guess what? You put 4 power on the board across 2 bodies, which means it's going to be really tough to deal with. 4 power already is good because the highest power we've previously seen typically is 3, unless you're playing multiple 1-drops, right? And so 4 power is amazing, but you also, and this is key, get to draw a card. So you get to keep your hand full for future threats to fight against those more controlling decks. That's where Faith in Your Friends really, really shines. Against some matchups where your opponent's playing a couple early units and you're trying to use this as more of an aggressive style, it could be a little bit weaker. But even then, if you're racing, let's say you're playing against a more space-oriented deck and you've got this deploying 2 units on the board, again, is very, very strong just because it's a lot of pressure on your opponent. Talk about a card that also has warmed up for me. We've got Hyperspace Disaster, 7-cost event in Vigilance, defeat all space units. This one, I mentioned this before when I first saw it, but I do think it's still more of a sideboard card, but that doesn't mean you can't slot in 1 or 2 of them. It really is going to be meta dependent, but we've seen a lot of decks that are more space oriented get some love in this set. Take Sudden Ferocity for an example. Being able to put that on your vehicle units is pretty powerful, and a lot of the decks really struggle because 8 resources is just a little bit too slow. If you think about it in like Darth Vader and Vader Yellow, for example, the turn that they're ending the game is the Vader flip turn, right? And this is 1 resource away from the Vader flip turn, so it's likely for you to have like a Super Laser Technician or a resupply to have gotten to that stage. If you're waiting for Super Laser Blast, that's another turn after the Vader deploy. That's oftentimes just a little bit too late. And so there are a lot of decks similar to that vein. Boba Fett's another one where they may have multiple space units in the arena where Hyperspace Disaster can actually clean up that stage. So really, really matchup dependent, but that doesn't mean that it isn't incredibly powerful in those specific matchups. So I think it could be, you know, maybe a very lightly played, but also sideboard focused card. And again, lots of space decks in the pre-meta for Secrets of Power, as the set is just about to officially release as of recording this video, and we will get to see the meta shortly. Let me know what you think about some cards in Secrets of Power. If there's any other cards that, you know, some people maybe have underrated, myself included, that you wanted to mention down below, and I'll see you all for the next one.